Councilmember, how are you?
How are you, Roberto?
Good, good. Let's start with why. Why are you running for borough president? Why the aggravation after 8 years serving in the council, your land use chair, you could walk away and sort of fall on a private sector opportunity potentially. You got a young family. Why run for borough president? Why take another bite at the apple of elected office?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me. Look, Roberto, I'm a kid from the South Bronx, born and raised in the borough of the Bronx. For the last 15 years, I've been in public service. 6 years as a district manager for the local community board, and 9 years as a New York City council member, of which the last 7 years I've served as the chairman of the land use committee. This is the greatest job that I've had, working in public service, being able to bring real change to areas in the borough of the Bronx that have been forgotten for far too long. And I've been able to utilize my platform as a council member to bring in over $400 million in capital dollars to my district. Millions of dollars for my playgrounds, millions of dollars for my public schools. I've approved over 10,000 units of 100% affordable housing in the South Bronx alone, and millions of dollars in program money. But there's still more work that needs to be done, and I want to utilize my experience, my relationships in government, to bring real change in areas that have been forgotten for far too long. And this is an opportunity. There's going to be a primary in June, and I want Bronxites to have an option. Do they want to continue with the services that they've received in the last 4 years, or do they want to give a Bronxite an opportunity, someone who has a proven track record, to bring change to the South Bronx and be able to bring that same change to the entire borough of the Bronx?
What is Borough President Gibson not doing as borough president that compels you? What are some of the issues or things you think she hasn't done as borough president, which sort of led you to say, hey, I need to run for borough president and make sure these things are happening?
Well, you just walk the streets of the borough of the Bronx. Our streets are dirty. Our streets are filled with graffiti. There's garbage, in all four corners of the borough of the Bronx. You can't have a car in the borough of the Bronx without having a lock on your tires, with the fear that you're gonna wake up with crates on your car and your four tires are gone. There are pockets in the borough of the Bronx that has high crime. There's no program money for our adolescents. There's pockets in my district. I was just door knocking yesterday in the Morris Park area, and I was talking to seniors where they want to see more programs for seniors in that area. And quite honestly, there are issues as well in our public school systems where our public schools, the infrastructure is dilapidated, and there's no voice in terms of how we can address those issues. And finally, our community boards. There are community boards in the borough of the Bronx that are in disarray, lacking leadership from Borough Hall. And as a former district manager from a local community board, I understand the internal politics of community boards, and I want to bring that experience to Borough Hall.
What about the sort of dynamic of you taking on the first woman and first African American to lead the borough president's office?
Yeah, this race is about giving Bronxites options, and that is what this race is about. This race is about how we're going to improve the borough of the Bronx, how we're going to improve the quality of life for our Bronxites, how we're going to provide options for our adolescents other than just to be hanging out in the corner or outside, how to ensure that we're addressing food inequality in the borough of the Bronx. And so that's what I bring to the table. It's about options. And
so, council member, you are a council member in the Bronx. She's the borough president. Have you ever tried to sort of approach the borough president to avoid this, right? To avoid a race, to avoid taking on an incumbent? Have you ever had a conversation with the borough president to say, hey, how do we address these concerns? Before you decided to work conceivably, you could say, hey, let's not have a sort of election. Let's avoid this. Can we come to the table and agree on how we can work for the betterment of the Bronx? Has that ever happened? That dialogue?
There really hasn't been a dialogue. We've worked on, some capital dollars, how to during budget times a few years back. But there really hasn't been a conversation to that matter. But the reality is that there's disarray in Borough Hall. There's concerns there. The staff, in terms of the turnover, the leadership. She just lost a deputy borough president. She just there's I'm hearing leadership staff, her director of operations just left. There's major concerns as to the operation that's happening there in Borough Hall, and so the fact of the matter is that we need change. And the borough of the Bronx needs change, and it needs to start with Borough Hall.
Talk about some of the endorsements you've received so far for this race.
Yeah, and
there's still time left. Obviously, more things will happen. More people will make endorsements. But so far, who's lined up behind you?
So we've received the endorsement of the Unity Club up in Riverdale. We received the Latino Victory Fund. We just rolled that out yesterday. We also received the endorsement of Night Class and Lights Out. And we're still meeting with labor, and we're still meeting with folks in terms of
how much money have you raised so far for the race?
Right now, we have on hand a little under $700,000 cash on hand.
And who's running your campaign? Who is running the operation?
So we're using Red Horse. Red Horse has been with me since the very beginning when I first ran in 2016. And my campaign manager is Christian Amato.
Council member, any conversations with any of the brokers? Obviously, you must have talked to the county leadership, Senator Jamal Bailey. What were those conversations like?
We've had many conversations with the chair, Bailey, and his team. And look, I understand the way the counties operate, and they go with the incumbent, and I understand it. And there's no hard feelings with me and council with Senator Bailey, and I understand their position, but. I'm going to move forward. I'm a kid from the borough of the Bronx. I'm confident in my work. I'm confident in the work that we've done. And we're getting our message out to Bronxites.
Did the county try to discourage you from running or tell you, hey, stand down, we have an incumbent borough president, maybe wait till there's an open seat again?
There's been conversations, but I don't feel that the establishment has really tried to stop me from running. What they've said is they're going to support the incumbent.
How about former borough president Ruben Diaz Jr.? And the reason I mention is these folks are former borough president, a known vote getter, right? Someone who has coattails and whose endorsement matters. Have you had a dialogue with him about a potential endorsement?
Look, I've met with all the players in the borough of the Bronx, those that are currently in office and those that are no longer in office, and I understand that many folks that are no longer in office, and they're in their private field. There's relationships, and so they may take a step back. And I respect that, but that's not to say that I don't have relationships. And once in a while I pick up the phone and I'll call. I'll call and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I have these relationships. I have these friendships, and I'm happy that they pick up my calls and they give me advice.
Councilmember, one thing on quality of life. I know you represent the areas around Roberto Clemente Plaza. Obviously, there's issues around opioid and methadone. What do you say to the critics that say you represent that area and you've done nothing to fix those quality of life issues? So why would you put that on Borough President Vanessa Gibson?
Well, you have to think about this. What's happening there on 149th Street and 3rd Avenue predates me coming into office, predates Vanessa Gibson coming into office. What's happening there on 149th Street is past leadership. When we're talking about, when you have over 20 non-for-profits, in that particular location providing substance abuse programming, needle exchanges. You have homeless shelters in that area. And the state continues to give licenses to these not-for-profits to provide services there. Well, you're going to have that mess that we have there right now. If you're giving someone a clean needle, yes, we want to do that because we want to avoid infectious disease. But what's happening? That person needs something to put in that needle. And they go around and they go to the illegal drug dealers. And that's how they're getting their drugs. And so what we need, and since I've been in office since 2016, I've been working with NYPD, putting together a multi-agency plan on how to address the issue. Now, what have I done to help alleviate the issue? Well, other than working with the administration in terms of having enforcement to get rid of the illegal drug dealing, other than being very vocal about the amount of not-for-profits in that intersection and the state continuously renewing and giving licenses, I put my money where my mouth is. I started what's called the Opioid Collective in partnership with Acacia Network and the Third Avenue Bid. We've allocated over $5 million in the last couple of years for this program, and what we've done is that we've used a method of where there are individuals who are former users who have cleaned themselves up, and on a daily basis they're out in the street trying to convince the active users to get off the street. Say, hey, there's a better life. I've changed my life, and this is an opportunity. Many times, but is their option. So they may say no. Well, we don't stop there. We continuously try to go every day, and we give them meals. We bring them socks. Socks is a big commodity that they ask for, and we provide medical care to attend to their wounds. Something else that I've done to try to alleviate the issue is we've had a big issue in Lincoln Hospital where the users were sleeping in the waiting room and in the ER, making it very uncomfortable for patients and the staff there. And so I worked with this current administration, and we opened up a safe haven directly across the street from Lincoln Hospital, and we've been successful in getting the users out of the waiting room, taking them to that safe haven across the street. They get a shower, they see a case manager, they see a doctor, they eat, they get a bed for 2 to 3 days. That's normally the average stay. They can stay there longer, but then they choose to go back out. And then we go right back at it again. But this is an issue that we have in that immediate area, predates me. This is my predecessors in the past who have approved these licenses and written letters of support for these programs to open up. And so my message is, not everyone in the South Bronx is addicted to opioid. Because you have so many programs there, everyone in the city is sending them to get services there. And that is why we have that issue, and we're trying to address it.
So, but just saying, hypothetically, somebody can conceivably say that the issue predates her as well.
No, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that issue does not predate her. That issue predates both of us. But what I've been able to do as well is that I brought high-level people to that intersection to bring change. I brought the first deputy mayor of health there a few months back. I brought the public advocate. We did a walkthrough. Last week, I brought the sanitation commissioner, the current sanitation commissioner. In October, I brought the sanitation commissioner, who's now the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, there as well. And so I've been active in bringing awareness. De Blasio, back before COVID, he made an $8 million announcement in which they were going to allocate funding to address that issue there. Tish James, the Attorney General, back in 2021, she sued Big Pharma, got over $250 million for New York City. She came to Lincoln Hospital to make that announcement. I was standing by her side. I even spoke in our press conference to talk about that investment that she was able to make by suing Big Pharma. So the highest levels of government leaders know about this issue, and they're trying their best. I'm talking about the Attorney General allocating funding to address a local issue. That's a big deal, and I thank her for that. And so, again, the city can continue to throw money in this problem, and we're going to continue to try to get the help that they need. But the ultimate solution for this, It's that they have to spread the love throughout the city and throughout the Bronx. You cannot, 149th Street and 3rd Avenue cannot be the focal point to get services for addiction.
Council member, how do you get your name out throughout the Bronx? Conceivably, you represent part of the South Bronx. How do you get around to Northeast Bronx? How do you get around Northwest Bronx? With, again, knowing you're a local council member, for example, do you get invited to events throughout the borough? How do you figure that piece out?
Yeah.
To get your name out there throughout the borough, to knock on doors in other parts of the borough.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the strategy that you have to put together in a campaign. You know, you have to break the Bronx up in pieces. You have to find ambassadors, folks that you've worked with. You have to and then, you know, with your campaign, you know, that's all part of your team. Putting a team together, putting a plan together, a canvassing plan, a digital plan, a mailer plan out there. But most importantly, it's me, you know, being out there myself, door knocking. And that's what I've been doing. You know, I'm talking to folks on the door. I'm doing my work that I need to do as a council member. I'm doing my work that I have to do as a father, making sure that my family is good, that my son is good. And then I'm out in the street, door knocking, talking to folks, listening to what their concerns are. How can we better improve their community? How can we better improve their quality of life? And that's how you win this election.
Councilmember, 3 things you'll do on day one if you're elected borough president. Yeah. What are the 3 things?
I'm going to call a state of emergency for housing in the city, in the borough of the Bronx, because there's a lack of it. I'm going to clean up Borough Hall. You know,
what does that mean?
I'm gonna sit with my team and we're gonna assess the responsibilities of individuals. I'm gonna assess BOEDC and the way that they're operating, because I'm hearing major concerns with the leadership there as well. And finally, I'm gonna sit down with all stakeholders, starting with my leaders in the community boards and my stakeholders in different parts of the borough, and we're going to combine a list of short-term quick wins and long-term wins, and how we're going to start changing the narrative and fixing these issues that are being ignored today.
Councilmember, any cross-endorsement potential opportunities or things that you're thinking through? There's a lot of races happening citywide, mayoral race, public advocate race, council races. Have you had any discussions about, hey, what about a cross-endorsement? Similar to like petitions, right?
Yeah. No, there has been, look, I'm conscious of what's happening, right? We have a mayoral race, public advocate race, comptroller race. There's a lot of excitement in the city right now with government, right? Many of my colleagues are incoming incumbents, so there's not that many council races, but they are. I'm focusing on my race. I think that the energy and the attention has to be on this Bronx Borough President's race, you know? And so I'm laser focused on this borough president's race, and that's what I'm
going to end with this: the 3 proudest moments now that you're wrapping up your time in the city council. 3 things you said, you know, that you're going to live past, right? Your time, that you're going to see your son.
Yeah.
You're going to say, "Damn, I'm proud of that." You know, you talk about your elementary school and the 3 things you say, because one of the things that happens, it happens in everyone in government. You come in and you have to learn where the bathroom is. You have to learn how to turn on the lights. Yeah. You really do. It takes time. It takes time for you to learn where things are, how to do things. And then in the case of the council, sometimes by the time you start figuring it out and not spinning your wheels as much, term limits sort of bite you in the behind and it's time to go. What are 3 things, again, your proudest moments, and 3 things you would say, damn, I wish I had more time. Yeah. Or I wish I would have done that better, would have, could have, should have.
Yeah. It's hard to say 3 things. I'm proud of a lot of work that I've done. I've been able to achieve in the council, you know. Being able to bring over $400 million in capital dollars to the South Bronx has been to me a very humbling experience. Using the power of the budget to address issues or make investments that have not been made in decades and in years. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned it earlier. I graduated from my elementary school in 1990 and 91. That year, that summer, it was extremely hot in that auditorium. Well, fast forward is 2016. I go to that back to that school as a council member to greet the graduates, and it's just as hot in 2016 as it was in 1991. So what did I do? I used the power of the budget, invested $1 million, $1.5 million, put air conditioning in that school. Across the street, there was a playground that was not operational or needed a facelift. I was able to allocate another $1 million for that playground. So I can say being able to use the power of the budget to address capital needs that have been ignored has been something that I'm extremely proud of. To be able to say, hey, I built over 10,000 units of 100% affordable housing, and seeing the redevelopment of the South Bronx. I grew up, I'm an 80s baby. I saw the crack epidemic. I saw after many of these buildings were burned down, the rubble. I walked to school. I visualized it. I remember going to school and seeing a line of individuals, of users who were going to an abandoned building and sticking their hand in the wall and getting their drugs and then going to use that. I lived that, and to know that same building where that was abandoned, that was used as a drug den, that kid that saw it came back and he cleaned it up. And he rebuilt. That's a very powerful thing that I'm extremely proud of. Being able to address the homelessness, in the city of New York. I have the most homeless shelters in the entire council, and a lot of it predates me. There's a lot of shelters that were there before I got there. Now, can I say that I didn't open up some? Yeah, well, yes. Some were necessary to open up to address the crisis that we have. Just like I opened up that safe haven across the street from Lincoln Hospital to get those users out of there. But I'm proud to say that I was able to pass a piece of legislation called a 15% homeless set-aside, requiring every developer to set aside 15% of their units for homeless families that are ready for independent living, and so I'm extremely proud of that as well. And finally, I can say that something that I'm really, really, really proud of is the relationships that I've been able to build during my time as a council member. And I've been able to use those relationships to bring real change to the lives of Bronxites. And I'll leave you with this example. When COVID hit in 2020, the city was shut down. Our supermarket shelves were empty. People were hoarding food. Folks in my community did not know where they were going to get food. We were getting calls on a daily basis. Well, I have the world's largest markets. I have the produce market, fish market, meat market. I have Baldors. I have over 700 businesses in Hunts Point. I was able to utilize my relationships with the markets. We held over 65 food events, not just in the South Bronx, but throughout the entire Bronx. My office alone fed 60,000 families. We kept track of that, all right? And to know that in a time of need, my office of at the time 6, 7, 8 people were able to feed 60,000 Bronxites and help those individuals put food on their table. It's I would say is a blessing. And I'm proud that God was able to put me in that position and at that moment and utilize my resources to give back to my community in their most darkest moments.
3 things you could have done better.
3 things that I could have done better.
You said, I wish I had a do-over there.
Yeah. 3 things that, you got to really think about that. That's always the hard one, right? What could you have done better? I got to think about that, Roberto. What can I have done better? It's hard when you're a council member and you are the chairman of the land use committee. Your responsibility is not just your district, but it's more of you're representing the entire city. So at times that pulls you away from being inside of your district. I try to spend as much time as possible, visit all my senior centers, maybe spending more time, and I spend as least time as I need to down here in 250 because I like to be in the borough of the Bronx, and that has always been on my time. But when we're talking about time, I have a 10-year-old, and I've missed a few of his baseball games, and I wish that I would have utilized my time better to spend more time with my family and to be with my son. I got to get back to you. I got to really think about what I could have done better. You
You
know,
know, it's crazy. It's interesting about the history of the city, the history of the South Bronx, and you know, the Bronx is burning. Howard Cosell and sort of that time, Jimmy Carter coming to Charlotte Street, and the rubble, and the message, right? Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, right? That whole conversation about the South Bronx. So when you talk about all that investment, housing, 100% affordability in areas where once upon a time there was rubble and waste and debris, it's impressive. So, but either way, Rafa, anything you want to add that I forgot to mention that you want to add to the conversation before we wrap?
No, look, I want to thank you for the opportunity to, give my side here and talk a little bit about the work that I've done and why I'm invested in running for borough president. You know, the Bronx, honestly, right now, we're in a renaissance of development. You know, they've built out Brooklyn. They built out Manhattan. They're trying to figure out how to build more in Queens. Staten Island, that's a different it's a different animal, you can say, right, in terms of how you're building. Land is cheaper in the borough of the Bronx. There are many empty lots. There are many forgotten neighborhoods. And I want to utilize my experience as the chairman of the Lands Committee, being able to negotiate responsible development in the city of New York and especially in the South Bronx. I want to utilize that experience to ensure that we're building responsibly in the entire borough.
Exactly. Not
right?
build out,
not just
build
build
out, but not pushed out, right?
Yeah, building responsibly.
Yeah.
And let me make it clear, too.
Because sometimes build out means pushed out.
No, let me make it clear as well. It's not a one-size-fits-all as well, right? Density in the South Bronx, it doesn't mean that's that same density you want to build in the Morris Park area. You don't want to kill the characters of neighborhoods. And I'm conscious of that. And I want to ensure communities that as, developers are trying to build in the borough of the Bronx, that we're doing it responsibly, that we're involving the communities, when de Blasio was mayor, and he had his neighborhood rezonings, they did a study of the Southern Boulevard rezoning. And I ended up killing that rezoning. I said, no, that rezoning was going to gentrify my community. That in that rezoning, there were 90% of the lots that they wanted to rezone were privately owned lots. By approving that rezoning, I was giving a blank check to developers, trusting them that they were going to do the right thing. And the reality is that, and I refuse to give up that power that the community board had, and the council, as a council member, had to control how development is happening. And so, I want to rest assured and let Bronxites know that I will listen to their concerns. I will listen to their recommendations as when we have conversations on developing. But this has been the greatest honor of my life, to a kid from the South Bronx, to come and serve as a council member, represent his community where he was born and lived in, and bring real change. And my 10-year-old son's actually seeing it.
Councilmember, thanks again for your time. Want to wish you the best of luck, and hopefully this won't be the last conversation. All the best. Talk soon.
Thank you.